Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today on our podcast, we have Sabine or Sabina, depending on how you want to pronounce it, depending on how she said, if it can roll off your tongue properly. And, everybody give her a cheer. There you go. There's a cheer for Sabine. So, I'm going to stick with Sabine just because I think that rolls off my tongue a little easier. They just won't shut up. They love you so much. Keep cheering. There we go. All right, that was good.
That applause was fantastic.
It's the live studio audience, in case you can't tell. They're all seated behind me. So, Sabine, tell me about you. Where are you from? I like to ask all of my authors this, so I can just learn about you a little bit.
Well, as we were just talking about before the recording, I was actually born in Europe, in Germany, hence the German name Sabine. But I've been lucky enough, I've lived in 3 continents and worked in 3 continents, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, in North America, for the last 30 years in Canada. So I've had a bit of a taste of all these lifestyles, all these different people I got to know. I've been very lucky that way.
Okay. And where do you live now?
In Canada. For the last 30 years, off and on, I do work in different countries if the opportunity arises.
Okay, cool. So tell me a little bit, before we get into the depths of your book, what kind of stuff do you like to read?
I read any and all whodunits, mysteries, crime series. Basically, if I want to boil it down, the stuff people do to one another and why they do it. That's always the question behind it. Why do we do to one another what we do?
So do you focus more on the darker side of that then, or is it more of a curiosity? Do you like to discover what your characters are doing as you're writing them?
It's a curiosity. It depends. I can read dark stuff, but then you have to take a break and do something lighthearted, something funny. Otherwise, it gets depressing.
Yeah. Okay. And so what genre would you consider your book? I believe it was called The Cannabis Preacher. Is that correct?
The Cannabis Preacher is a financial thriller. We call it a financial thriller. It's set in that environment of startup industries, of new businesses, of incorporating and going onto the stock exchange. So yeah, we're classifying it as a financial thriller. Suspense, a little bit of mystery. In book 2, somebody actually does die, but that's a ways away yet.
Okay. And how many books are out currently, and how many are you planning for in the series?
The first one is written and it's out. 2, 3, and 4 are also written, but they're not coming out until May through August of next year, 2023.
Okay, so you're planning to release one per month or something like that?
Yeah, it's a rapid release. We're going to leave about 3 months for the first one and then 1 per month coming out for the other ones. What I have learned and heard from various industry insiders is that if it is a series, people will be more likely to read and buy the series when they know that the other segments in that series are available or going to be available shortly.
So you're not going to pull a George R. Martin and just leave the audience hanging, is what I'm hearing.
No, they're all 4 of them are written. They're just being edited and proofread and all that at the moment.
Okay. What's the approximate word count of all of those separate novels?
They're reasonably lengthy. They're about 130,000 each.
Oh, wow.
I am a very prolific writer.
Okay, yeah, well, I'd like to get into your writing habits in a little bit. First, why did you choose this financial thriller genre, as you put it? What makes you appreciate this genre a lot?
I have worked in the industry for the last 30 years with startup companies, as I mentioned earlier, and I've met all these characters. It's a very special person who will go out there and found a company and bring it to the stock market and take that leap of an IPO, of raising funds. They're very special characters, and I've met them all, and there's good ones and bad ones and in-betweens, and they're all unbelievably interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Now, when you say that you're involved in the industry, I'm assuming, what was it, the financial aspect of it or the cannabis aspect of it?
Both. I've worked in beer brewing, I've worked in mining, I've worked in cannabis, usually in a position of finance and executive assistance.
Okay,
So I've
awesome.
seen a lot of these industries from the inside.
Yeah, I guess they tell you to write what you know, and so, like you said, you're kind of writing these characters maybe with someone you actually know or have known in mind, and kind of putting their experiences on paper. Awesome, I like that. So, give me a summary without getting too far in depth. I mean, you can give spoilers if you'd like of the progression of maybe your first novel or maybe the rest of the series. I'll leave that up to you.
Well, The Cannabis Preacher is really set in the early days of cannabis legalization, when after our tech bubble came the so-called green rush, and there were cannabis companies springing up all over the place, these financial cowboys, as we called them, founding companies, raising funds left and right, and sometimes absconding with millions in the process. That was happening here in Canada and in the States. And right in this setting, we have our two main characters who just decide one day they're going to found a company, a cannabis company. Neither one of them knows how to grow cannabis or what's involved here, but let's just do it. Let's be drug dealers. How hard could it be to be a drug dealer? And what could possibly go wrong? Well, actually, an awful lot. And that is the premise of book number one. As they get deeper and deeper into this company, more and more things start going wrong. Funds are needed and they're not there. Funds are wasted. Shareholders get angry. Rules are broken. That's our setting in the first one. In the second and following ones, we redeem them all.
Okay. So, would you say that your main characters are anti-heroes, or are you trying to get your audience to empathize with them, or are they the bad guys in some ways? Give me a little bit of insight into that.
Connor Beauregard, my main character, could certainly be an anti-hero. He learned the art of the sell from his father, who was a televangelist who could talk the money right out of your pocket. His friend Raphael is the builder. He's more down to earth, and he tries to bring him down to the bottom of things. Let's take this one step at a time. Let's do it right from the beginning. And between these two, the tension between these two and the tension with financial regulators, with rules, with rule breaking, that is what makes that book such a wild ride.
Okay. Awesome. Now, is this the first series that you've delved into, or do you have any other previous works?
That might surprise you, but a lot of years ago, I actually wrote a series of romance books. There were about 15 in the series. They were all set in the country music genre. And each and every one was fun in the way that all the musicians would record in the same recording studio, and you would meet the same characters in every book. Not necessarily as main characters, but certainly as side characters. So that was fun for a while. But after 15 of them, that was enough.
Yeah,
That
I
was
can
enough.
see that.
Let's try something else.
Yeah. Okay. So I can't say that I've ever read a financial thriller. Are there any other books out there on the market right now that yours are similar to? And if so, what makes yours different than the ones that are currently on the market?
Think of The Wolf of Wall Street. Everybody knows The Wolf of Wall Street. That's very much like what I'm writing. One fairly famous one that's out right now that actually people have mentioned to me is The Red Notice by Bill Broder. That's a super interesting book. If you haven't picked it up, please do. It plays in Russia. It's a super interesting book. That's very much like what I would write like. But we are calling it The Wolf of Wheat Street.
Okay.
That's a little twist I've put on it.
Yeah, that's funny. I like the play on words there. Being, as you described yourself, a prolific writer, 130K words across multiple novels and then 15 books previously. What are your writing habits like? How often do you write every day? And do you commit yourself? Is this your full-time job? Or explain that to me a little bit.
Now I'm mostly retired. I only do projects here and there, so the rest of it is writing. That's my commitment. But even when I was still working full-time, I'd write every day. Not only because I wanted to, not only because I had to finish a book, but because I had to write. I had to get the story out. Number one, that's how I learn, and that's how I express myself, is by writing. But because if I don't write, I would become antsy. So I sit down every single day and I just start doing it. And people are worried about, the blank page in front of me. I fortunately have never had that problem. I just start. Because the beauty of writing on a computer is you can always delete the stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Everybody writes bad stuff now and then, and you just delete it in the edit phase.
So you're someone who would say, get it all on the page and then edit it later. I hear a lot of people are big proponents of that.
Yeah, you just sit down and you start writing. And then you go over it again. And as a matter of fact, that's how I get into it when I start writing for the day. I read what I've written yesterday, at which point I can do a little bit of that editing process. And then you're into it, and then you just keep going.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I have the bad habit of trying to, when I get deeper into my books, reread, many, many chapters to get to the point of where I'm at again. And it just is such a time sink. I need to just be able to pick up the last few paragraphs or something like that, because it's an ego thing. I just love my writing. I don't know if other people love it, but I love reading what I've written. I mean, I guess that's a good start at least, because if I don't even like it, then who else would like it? But kind of going back to what you were saying about some people, just feeling the need to write inside them. I definitely feel that as well, and I feel like writing is certainly an art. It's an art form, and you have to claw the ideas out of your head and get them on the page. Some people may be in it for the money. Some people maybe for the fame. I feel like the majority of authors are really in it to share their ideas with the world. And I know I say this quote sometimes. My audience will hear me say it. My favorite quote is, "Writing is an act of ego." And it's like, whatever is in my head is so important that I got to get it on the page so you can know what I'm thinking too. And it's very, very egocentrical, I will say, but I definitely am with you on the whole art form thing. So what...
Stories, Matt, we're storytellers. And in the medieval times, when there was no Twitter and when there was no TikTok, there would be these storytellers that would walk from castle to castle and tell their stories. And that's how people shared news. And we're still storytellers. Fiction or not.
One of my biggest fears is that I'll never get all the stories that I have in my head out on the page by the time I die someday. I'd love to be immortal and just be like a little person in a computer telling stories. That'd be cool.
Sit down and write them. That's the way to get them out.
So, when do you find time for writing in your day? Like, for example, myself, I get up and I try and write before work. I usually don't have the energy after work, but you said you're retired. You just sit down for the morning. I think Stephen King said, he writes for 5 pages or whatever that is every day. Or some people say, I write 2 hours a day. Or do you write in the mornings and that? Explain to me what your habits are like.
I am one of those horrible people who gets up shortly after 5 o'clock in the morning. And I organize my day, my email, my messages. So by the time 10 o'clock comes around, my day's organized. I know what I have to do and when and where, and then I can start writing. I have to be awake and in gear, but because I get up so horribly early, I give myself that extra time. And that's not by choice. It's just because that's when I wake up. I can't even sleep in if I wanted to. So
Yeah, my wife and I have a relatively young child, and so our schedule has been all over the place. But she's been sleeping until 7 now, and I hate to say it, but I've been taking advantage of also sleeping until 7 when I should be getting up at 5 to write. So thank you for pricking that conviction in my heart.
with a young child, you're probably going to have a few years yet before that works.
Yeah, definitely. So walk me through what your journey to publication has been like, and I'm assuming it's two separate journeys, maybe for your romance series and then now this new series. How have those been different and or the same for you?
I've self-published both of them. I have spent quite a bit of time investigating and trying to get traditional publishers. There's two things I didn't like about that. Number one, they actually take the rights to your book. And somewhere in the back of my brain, that just tweaked me as wrong. And with a book like my own, that was partially based on actual things that happened, and the rest of it was fictionalized. I just wanted to keep the control over that. So it's all self-published. I do have what's called a publishing services provider. These are people that walk you through best practices and tips and tricks and things to do, how to launch, how to do all of it. So that's a nice hybrid between being all by yourself and now facing Ingram and KDP and all these things and having somebody tell you, this is how that works, this is what you need to be doing. And you still retain all of the rights to your book. So if anybody ever wanted to make a movie, The Wolf of Wheat Street, we could do that. We have the rights. We have the rights. So, yeah, I've self-published all of them, including my romances, and they're under a different name. They're under a pen name. But my financial thrillers are under Sabine Frisch. They're on Amazon right now, and my own company, Thinking Dog Publishing.
Okay, awesome. So going back a step to, you're saying there's kind of like a consultant in the industry. I really like that idea because coming into it, I have next to no knowledge about the publishing industry and or all the business practices that go along with self-publishing. So if I were to want to find one of these individuals and I were to go to Google, what would I type in?
The one I'm working with is Paper Raven, but there are publishing services providers, they call themselves, and literally they give you the best practices of what works in their experience. They give you the templates of this is how this is done. And in the case of the one I'm using, there's also a weekly writers group, an online writers group, which I find incredibly helpful just from a supportive point of view. Because whatever you're going through in your writer's journey, there's somebody who's already been there. Another writer, another indie writer who's going, yeah, I've experienced that, and this is how I solved it, and this is what I would do. So I found that very helpful.
And talking to other people who have been self-published, I've realized that being self-published is not as simple as, putting your document up on, Amazon or whatever it is, and people will just flock to you and buy it. It's a whole mini business, and it's like you have to do your marketing, and you have to have your editor, and you have to have someone who's being your publicist. Maybe it's like a whole business within just being an author. So enlighten me on what some of your favorite and least favorite parts of that are.
Actually, editing was the easiest ever because my editor loved the story and felt there was not much we needed to do. Proofreading was very, very painful. You can't proofread your own stuff, unfortunately, so we went through several passes of that. There is interior design and styling, which I didn't even know existed, but now I know about. The entire idea of having people design your cover was yet another journey. Are we getting some interference?
Getting a little bit of feedback or static or something like that. I think it's better now.
There. There we go.
Awesome.
Sorry about that.
No
Sorry
problem.
about that. Yeah, having a cover designed, what you want is a really, really hot cover. Having your social media tie in with the theme of your cover, with the theme of your interior design, all of that takes so much work and effort. And you don't even know as a layperson that it needs to be done, never mind how it should be done properly.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
having a consultant there who will tell you, now we're going to do this, and this is what we have found our best practices, that's just so valuable.
So as far as what they're charging, do they charge you like a flat rate, or is it like a retainer or a percentage of sales? How does that work?
No, in my case, it's a flat rate. I believe there are others out there who are other fee structures. In my case, it's a flat rate. It's so much for your first book. And then the following ones obviously are less because we already know one another. We know what we need to do and how to do it.
Okay, awesome. So let's start wrapping up here a little bit. What impact on the world do you want your book to have, or do you see it as simply entertainment value?
I see it as a great story, yes, and perhaps in some ways also as a warning. Be careful of who you hand your money to. One of my reviewers said, oh my God, anybody who's ever invested in anything will start to think they have met all of these people before. Other than that, it's a good yarn. It's an entertaining story. And I hope people will get some joy out of it.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid reason to want to tell stories, is to entertain people. Kind of like you were talking about people going to the castles and stuff back then. I mean, that was their job, but I'm sure they liked it. And I feel like if I and many other people didn't like writing, we were just wasting our time sitting down in front of a computer trying to bash something out, banging our heads up against the keyboards.
And we are also the people at every party or in any bar. We're going to be the ones who has a story about everything.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Even if I have to make it up on the spot.
Oh, well, that's the best part about it.
So did you want to read an excerpt from one of your novels?
I have a few. This is my book here. I mean, on the podcast, we won't be able to see it, but I do have it in my hand. I do have a few pages bookmarked here if you'd like me to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
All righty. One deal at a time. On that note, he picked up the little bar menu and looked over the current offerings. Who's in the kitchen today, Brittany? He asked of the bartender. Marcel or Jonas? Marcel, the little blonde answered and picked up his empty glass with a questioning look. Connor nodded, straightening up a bit. Yes and yes. Have Marcel make us up a plate of oysters, the way I like them. Oysters, Raphael chuckled. The man is cooking up something, I'd say. Connor steepled his fingers and put them against his lips. What we need now, he said, speaking slowly and enunciating every word as if it were a precious commodity, is a project. A good, juicy deal nobody can pass up. Something that makes money. Lots of it. Something you just can't say no to. He smiled a little, and Raphael could almost hear him speak. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is something you just can't say no to. And his hands would just reach out to them, as if drawing them in. Gun running, he half joked to distract himself from the hypnotic image of Connor. Drugs, prostitution. No, nothing illegal. Connor rolled his eyes to the ceiling and shook his head, but between the two of them, they knew the very definition of illegal was a malleable concept in the financial world. It had never stopped either one of them. There were always ways to make it happen. But I do like the way you're thinking. Marcel brought out the plate of oysters for the two men with all the sauces Connor liked and a smaller portion of the ones Raphael liked. a fact that did not go unnoticed by the smaller men. What is it with him? You slip him $100 now and then to get the preferential treatment, or what? Raphael groused, picking up a lemon wedge. Almost like you're the bloody president or something. Always tip the staff. Connor dipped the silver spoon into the sauce and slurped his oyster. Your life will be that much easier every day. You, my friend, are just too cheap to realize it. Don't believe in throwing money away, Raphael said and helped himself. These guys make a decent living as it is. These guys. Another oyster disappeared. Marcel is a wizard in the kitchen. Matter of fact, the other day we were sitting around just talking. The bar was empty and he told me. The hand holding the oyster lowered and his eyes narrowed. Well, shit. Something wrong? Raphael's hand pulled back as quickly as he had reached for the next oyster. The food? What was it you said earlier? Say it again. Say what? I said what we need is a deal, something people can't say no to, and you said, fuck, Raphael, say it again. I don't know, I was bullshitting. I said gun running, drugs, prostitution, drugs. Right, I don't think either you or Marcel is going to drive into the desert in a Winnebago and cook up some meth, no matter how easy it looked on TV. Not crystal meth, my friend, Connor said, his eyes narrowing. I'm talking about something much better. Better? Way better. And legal. Cannabis. And that was the story of how the country came to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for gracing us with that. Anything else? Any final words you want to say?
I thank you so much for having me on your podcast and for your interest in my little project. I hope other people got interest in it as well. It's called The Cannabis Preacher Sermon 1, and it's available now on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Sabine, and have a good evening.
You